Hello, boys and girls. I hope everybody's doing okay. Happy Friday. Whew, it's been a long week of testing, hasn't it? Well, I know you guys might not remember what we've been talking about in ELA for this week, but we have been talking about recalling events in a fable to identify a moral or a lesson the author wanted to convey or teach us. And remember, from Tuesday, we know that a moral is also known as a central message in a fable or a folk tale. So, our essential question is how can I determine the central message of a folktale of folktales, myths, or fables? So, what we're going to do is we're going to watch a short video on folktales. We're going to talk about what folktales are. We're going to read Jack and the Beanstalk, and then we're going to fill out a graphic organizer for summarizing. Somebody wanted, but so then you're going to have a chance to read your own folktale and complete a graphic organizer and answer just a few questions. So let's watch this video. I'm going to move myself off screen.
Today we will learn what is a folktale.
There.
Today we will learn what is a folktale. A folktale is a fictional story that has been passed down from person to person for many years. Sometimes there are many different versions of a folktale. You may have read these folktales before. Little Red Riding Hood, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and the Three Little Pigs. Most folktales usually have animals that act like real people, a lesson or moral, and a problem that gets solved in the end. Folktales can come from all over the world. There are African folktales, Chinese folktales, Native American folktales, and even Latin folktales. Now that you know a bit more about folktales, let's read one. Anansi and the Magic Stick, written by Eric A. Kimmel, illustrated by Janet Stevens.
All right. So, a folktale, just like they said in the video, is a fictional story, which means this story is not real. But it's a story that teaches a moral or a lesson. It's usually a longer story with a problem and solution, and sometimes it has good versus evil characters. One of the most famous folktales is Jack and the Beanstalk, and we're going to be reading that today. But a folktale is a story that is told and passed down from generation to generation. And I know you guys are probably like, Mr. Cavender, what in the world is a generation? Well, not only is a generation our code word for today's video, but a generation is also a group of people, older and young, it's a group of older and younger people in a community. So think about you and your parents. You and your parents are in a different generation. They're a lot older than you are. And your parents and your grandparents are also in a different generation. And you as an elementary schooler and your grandparents are 2 generations apart. So it's basically like the different ages within a family. All right, let's read the Jack and the Beanstalk. Jack and the Beanstalk. All right, Jack and the Beanstalk. There was once a poor widow who lived with her son, Jack, far out in the country. Jack was good natured but lazy. When at last there was no money left to buy food, Jack's mother told him to take the dairy cow to the market and sell her for a good price. On his way to the market, Jack met a strange man who asked him where he was going with the cow. "I'm going to the market to sell her," he said. "I will give you these 5 magic beans for the cow," said the strange man. Jack thought this was a good bargain, so he traded the cow for 5 beans. How do you think the mother is going to feel that he traded the cow, this dairy cow, for just 5 beans? Jack hurried home and said, "Look at the 5 beans I got for the cow." "You foolish lazy boy," cried his mother angrily. "Now we will go hungry." She threw all the beans out the window and she and Jack went to bed without any supper. When Jack awoke early the next morning, When Jack awoke early the next morning, he noticed an odd shadow across his window. He ran outside to see that a huge beanstalk had sprung up during the night. It grew so high he could not see the top. Jack was curious and decided to climb up the beanstalk. He climbed for hours. When he finally reached the top, he saw a great castle in the clouds. The magnificent castle looked as if it were a vision in a dream. Jack knew from his tired arms and legs that he had not just dreamed his long climb. He rubbed his eyes to make sure he was not seeing things. As he got closer to the castle, Jack met a beautiful fairy. She told Jack that the giant who lived in the castle had killed Jack's father long ago and had stolen all his gold. The tiny fairy said that he should take back what was rightfully his, and then she disappeared. When Jack reached the steps, he asked the giant's wife, excuse me. When Jack reached the steps, he asked the giant's huge wife for some supper. If you stay here, the giant will have you for supper, she said. But Jack was so hungry he did not care. The woman gave in and fixed Jack a good supper. Soon they heard the thump thump of heavy footsteps. Just as the giant entered the room, his wife hid Jack in the oven. The giant sniffed the air and roared, "Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman." "It's just your supper," said the wife. The giant ate his huge supper in one huge swallow and then roared, "Fetch my gold coins." He is not a good looking giant. The woman brought in bags of gold coins that had belonged to Jack's father. The giant fell fast asleep counting the money. Jack took a bag of gold and ran back to the beanstalk. He threw the bag down to his mother's garden and climbed down as fast as he could. Jack's mother was overcome with joy when the gold coins rained down. They could now take care of their needs for a while. But then one day, the gold ran out. All right, I want you to pause this video and make a make a prediction on what you think is going to happen now that the gold has ran out. All right. Jack disguised himself and went up the beanstalk again. He wanted more of his father's gold. When Jack returned to the castle, very tired and hungry, the giant's wife did not want to help him. "The last boy I helped stole a bag of my husband's gold," she said. But Jack was so polite, she finally let him in and gave him a drink of water. Just then, the giant's footsteps shook the floor. Jack barely had time to hide in the oven before the giant entered the kitchen and roared angrily, "Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman." "Don't be silly," said the giant's wife. The giant ate his supper, and then he told his wife to bring him his hen. Jack heard the giant shout, "Lay!" When he peeked through the hole in the oven, he saw the hen lay a perfect golden egg. After that, he told the hen to lay 3 golden eggs. The giant fell asleep. Jack leaped out of the oven, snatched the hen, and ran. I'm just yawning today. Jack leaped out of the oven, snatched the hen, and ran. When Jack reached the beanstalk, he began to climb down quickly. He took the wonderful hen to his mother. The hen laid a golden egg on command every time. With the golden eggs, Jack and his mother were able to fix up their cottage, and there was always plenty to eat. After a while, however, Jack decided to climb back up the beanstalk. Jack sneaked back into the castle and hid in a large pot. The giant sniffed the air and said, "Fee, fi, fo, fum." His wife went over to the oven and looked in, but there was no boy inside. After the giant ate his supper, he called for his magic harp. His wife quickly brought him his beautiful harp of gold. The giant told the harp to play. It began to play the most entrancing music Jack had ever heard. It was not long before the giant was lulled to sleep by the music. When Jack heard the giant snoring, he knew it was safe to climb out of the pot. He grabbed the giant's harp and started to run away with it. Master, master, the harp cried. The giant woke up. The giant awoke with a start. Jack jumped off the table, the harp in his arms, just as the giant made a grab for him. Jack tightly held onto the harp and ran for his life. Jack could hear the huge thump thump of the giant's footsteps closing in behind him. He knew that the giant took large steps, so his fear was great. But the angry giant had just finished a filling supper, and that slowed him down enough for Jack to reach the beanstalk ahead of the giant. Jack clumsily climbed down the beanstalk with the harp, calling out to his mother as he went, "Mother, bring me the axe!" Oh, look at that big giant uh, chasing Jack. The giant was halfway down the beanstalk when Jack reached the ground. Jack took the axe from his mother. With one mighty chop, he cut the beanstalk in two. The giant crashed to the ground and died. Jack, his mother, the hen, and the harp lived happily ever after. All right. So now let's look back at our graphic organizer. So for summarizing, we have somebody wanted but so then. For somebody, we need to figure out who was the main character or person in the story. Well, it was Jack. His name is even in the title. I'm going to use bullet points. So Jack. I'm actually going to write complete sentences. Jack was the main character in this story. What did the character or person want? So what did Jack want? Well, pause it and see if you can figure out what he wanted. All right. So Jack wanted the gold from. Jack wanted food and money for his cow, his dairy cow. But something happened. What was the problem? But what was the problem? He sold the cow for only 5 beans, and his mother got angry and threw the beans outside. How did the character or person try to solve the problem? Well, the problem was still that he wanted food and money for his dairy cow, but he didn't have any. So he decided that he was going to climb the beanstalk. And a fairy told him that the giant had stolen all of his father's gold. But that's not all he did. He started to steal the gold back. Little by little. And then what was the resolution or the outcome? How did the story end? He stole enough gold for his family to live happily ever after, and the giant died. So he could never steal from them again. All right. So today, you guys are going to have a chance to read a story on your own. You are going to go into Canvas. You'll click your ELA tab, You'll click Friday, because today is Friday. You're going to click today's date, and it says Folktales. You're going to be reading a story called A Good Team. So in reading this story, you're going to read a story about a chameleon and a crocodile. After you do that, you're going to answer these 5 questions. This question here says, what is the moral of the story? So for example, what do you think the moral of Jack and the Beanstalk was? See if you can pause this video and figure out what Jack and the Beanstalk is. All right. So, the moral of Jack and the Beanstalk is that you kind of have to make the most out of life's opportunities. Jack took a big chance in selling his cow for just 5 beans, didn't he? And yes, it did pay out in the end. So you kind of have to take risks in life to succeed. So, what is the moral of A Good Chameleon? What is the lesson that the characters are learning? And then, what key detail describes Chameleon's initial fear of crocodile? Then what you're going to do is you're going to summarize the story by using the somebody wanted but so then model. Who was the main character in the story? What did the character want? But what was the problem? How did the character or person try to solve the problem? And then how did the story end? Finally, what you're going to do is you're going to type today's code word. I said it earlier. Remember, if you do not type this code word, your teacher is not going to grade your assignment for you. All right, boys and girls, have a super fun and safe weekend. Remember, on Mondays, Virtual Mondays, Zoom starts at 9 o'clock. And if you don't join Zoom, remember, all you have to do on Monday is do your 45 minutes of iReady reading and math. All right, boys and girls, have a good weekend. Bye.